Talkin Cougars is presented by Flat Stick Pub, local craft beer, old school fun, memorable moments. What's up? Welcome to Talkin Cougars. I am Michael Bumpus with my guy Alex Brink. Man, our Cougs fall to Arizona State 27-38. Man, that was a tough one. Lots of things to talk about, lots of things to correct. We're gonna give you our thoughts.
Yeah, Bump, it's good to be back. Wish it was under better circumstances. Let's get into it. Time now for our opening drive. Brought to you by Valley Buick GMC. See you in the Valley. Bump, my opening thoughts. It's a little hard to put into words because this is a tough slide for our Washington State Cougars. A 4-game losing streak and a defense that looks like it just can't stop the run in any capacity. And that's leading to all sorts of problems for Washington State. You saw it against Arizona State. Kenny Dillingham, the head coach for the Sun Devils, who also calls plays, boy, he was dialing it up. Play action pass. He went unbalanced formation, and it showed up time and time again to the tune of over 500 yards of total offense for the Arizona State Sun Devils.
Yeah, Scatterboo with 121 yards on the ground, 235 total for the Arizona State Sun Devils. That's always tough, man. When you can run the football, you really control the tempo of the game. The Cougs were on the road. The crowd got into it, and it seemed like Arizona could pretty much have their way. Once the ground game gets going, Bourguet is able to step back, throw it to Elijah Badger, and make plays down the field. I think it comes down to being aggressive on that defensive line and maybe dialing up some blitzes just to clog those gaps and just be gap disciplined. You know, when you are creating those big runs, as Arizona State did, the gap discipline seems to be off, and you're not getting that push on that defensive line. We know that there's personnel there to compete on that defensive line, man. It's all about just really just execute. You know, that's what it comes down to. And I'm interested to see how they bounce back. You mentioned a 4-game losing streak. Man, what a month does. 4 weeks ago, we were ranked number 13 in the country and talk about the possibilities of a Pac-12 championship. Now I think it's time you shift your thinking a little bit and just go game by game. Correct the things that's going to help this defense. And I think you mentioned it. It starts with stopping the run.
You got to stop the run. The other thing that really stood out to me, because you can go back to the Oregon State game where the Beavers rushed for almost 200 yards or over 200 yards, excuse me. So it's not like this defense all year, even in wins, has been stopping the run. But in pass situations and long down situations, they were able to get off the field, right? Third and long. They had a 3rd and 20 plus against Arizona State that the Sun Devils converted. And a lot of it was because the Cougs couldn't get any pressure on the Sun Devils and Trenton Bourguet, the quarterback, and it felt like he was just had the chance to make throws on long down situations and get out of tough spots for the Sun Devils. And that to me stood out even more so than stopping the run, is the inability to get to the passer and make him uncomfortable.
Sun Devils averaged 10.5 yards per play. They were 8 for 11 on third downs, as you mentioned. And when you are 8 for 11 on third downs, that means you're keeping drives alive. And we talked about this defense. You mentioned how against Oregon State, yeah, they still ran for over 200 yards, but able to get off the field. When you're not able to get off the field as a defense, you're tired, you're gassed up, you got to burn some timeouts. I'm not sure how deep the rotation is on that Coug defensive line. We know in the secondary you have some guys. So yeah, it's a simple game when you break it down, right? Don't allow the explosives, get off the field on third down, and make a team have to beat you in multiple ways. Make guys uncomfortable. And that's what we haven't been able to do that so far this year in the last month or so.
No, not at all. The offense, though, looked a little bit better. Again, kind of followed up on that game down in Autzen Stadium against the Ducks and were productive once again, but also had some similar issues in the red zone, not able to finish with touchdowns, kicked some field goals, went out on downs a couple times. I think in the end, you know, for a Washington State team that's struggling to stop the run, struggling on defense, the offense, it's a race to 30, right? You got to get to 30 points, and the Coug offense couldn't do it, even though Cam Ward looked better, and it felt like there were some bright spots from the offensive side.
Yeah, I love me some Cam Ward. I prefer to be throwing touchdowns and getting those rushing touchdowns. I want him to spread it all across the yard. But maybe that's something they lean into. Maybe they do use Cam Ward a bit more in the red zone. It seems like when he did score in the red zone, those weren't designed quarterback runs. That's him just kind of making something out of nothing. If you're having trouble down there, maybe switch it up a little bit. Still waiting for them to get physical. I'm still waiting for Nikhil Watson to have his signature game. Still hasn't had it yet. So the most frustrating part is that you see the personnel and you know the capabilities are there. But again, it's all about putting it all together. But I want to big up Cam Ward, man. You know, a lesser quarterback would fold during this stretch of losses, but it seemed like he had a couple games where he struggled a bit and he's starting to get back to himself. This is a team sport. You know, you need everybody out there to contribute and do their thing, and this week they have opportunity to do that.
Yeah, we'll give our thoughts a little more about Cam Ward coming up next. Talkin Cougars is presented by Flat Stick Pub. Welcome back to Talkin Cougars. One of the few bright spots against Arizona State was the play of Washington State quarterback Cam Ward. It's time now for our Coug Spotlight, presented by Cougs First. Think Cougs First for products, services, and hiring. Cam Ward followed up a strong performance against Oregon with another one against the Arizona State Sun Devils. I felt like, in all honesty, if Cam Ward wasn't on the field, Washington State wouldn't even have been anywhere close to Arizona State in this game. He was confident throwing in the pocket. He made some great decisions running the football, and he showed his creativity again, on a night where Washington State had to have every bit of it, and he almost pulled it off for the Cougs.
Yeah, man, there are a couple of things you can count on with Cam Ward, right? He will extend those plays. He will make some great throws, man. I love watching the way the ball spins after he snaps it off of his wrist. And I'm looking at his numbers, B. Last 3 games, 70% completions, 70% completions, 73% completions. Had a 48% game against UCLA. He struggled there, but he's been the constant in this offense, right? 16 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions. You can count on Cam Ward to give your team a chance, right? So I think that's where he can instill some confidence in his team. Because if I'm a defense, I'm thinking, all right, we are who we are, okay? They're going to be able to run the football a little bit. If we can get a few stops, we can put the ball in our quarterback's hands, and he's going to keep us going. And I'm big on body language too, man. I mean, his body language has been positive throughout this whole thing. Hey, B, we've been in some battles where we're getting beat up, right? It's important that the quarterback gets back in the huddle and instills confidence in his guys and lets them know, hey, we're going to keep fighting. No matter what happens, we're going to keep fighting. And he does exactly that.
Yeah, I have kind of a unique perspective as the analyst on the radio call. So I get to go down after the games and interview players and coaches. And, without fail, Cam Ward comes out of the locker room, does the media interviews, whether it's a loss or a win, whether he plays good or bad. He comes out, he's got a smile on his face. He's always respectful, and you could tell he's a real leader. And I think that goes a long way because those things that he does off the field show up on the field, to your point. I mean, he gets up and he battles. It's a really difficult spot to be a quarterback in an offense that just flat out cannot run the football, and the defense knows that you're going to drop back and pass because they get to just tee off on you. And Cam stands in there and he delivers the football. And in the first half, that offense delivered 3 touchdown drives where they're keeping the defense in it, even though the defense can't stop Arizona State, right? The offense kept answering, and there were moments where, Cam's fitting balls into tight windows, he's scrambling, he's getting out, and eventually that kind of wears down to our point earlier about the red zone where you kick a few field goals, you go out on downs, but at some point, if you're always going on a long field, you're always going on 75, 80, 90-yard touchdown drives, it wears you out. Eventually, you need some short fields. Eventually, you need some turnovers. Washington State's defense has not had a turnover since the end of the first half against UCLA. And for a defense that prides itself on turning the ball over, that makes it really hard on an offense that's always having to go on long fields.
Yeah, and that turnover was a pick 6. So
Yeah, right.
they put some points on the board as well. I like your point about the drives, right? You would love to work with a short field. We're not asking for 30 or 40 yards, but you looked at the drive chart. First drive, 15 plays, 75 yards. The opening drive, you love to see that, right? The offense puts some drives together. You say, okay, establish yourself here. Let's see what happens. Their next touchdown drive, 7 plays, 75 yards, 5 plays, 75 yards. It gets tough. You're asking for explosive plays every single time you have the football, which is great. Plays of 20, 25 yards. But when you're not able to run the football, that means that you're asking that QB to create these plays and receivers to create the plays. So it adds a bit more pressure. Now, this team can do it, right? We've seen them put these drives together. We've seen Cam Ward with his leadership, his mobility, his accuracy, get all the receivers involved. But again, it comes down to the run game. You want to take some pressure off of them. But yeah, I just want to tip my cap to Cam Ward, because you go from being a guy in the Heisman conversation to a leader of a team that's struggling, that just wants to make a bowl game at this point. Yet, you're right, when I hear him talk, when I look him in the eyes, I'll be there this Saturday, I'm going to holler at him as well. He hasn't flinched at all. I think he understands what his role is on this team. Quarterback is the hardest position in sports. I salute all you guys who played that position. The responsibility is crazy. And you're the face of the team. So I think he understands that. He knows they're in a tough position. And I hope when he is in the locker room, he is talking to these guys and holding them accountable like I know Jay Dickert and the rest of the squad is.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that he is. And you really feel like with Cam Ward, what's really impressive is after that first 4-game run, the Heisman Trophy conversation, and then some struggles, right? Pressed a little bit against UCLA. That Arizona performance wasn't great, even though he played okay. The offense really struggled. It felt like he kind of grabbed this team by the bootstraps offensively and said, "I'm going to carry it." Right? Led the team in rushing again. Obviously, was dynamic throwing the football, and he's going to have to be dynamic moving forward as we look at these next 4 games, particularly with the Stanford Cardinal coming into Pullman.
All right, well, speaking of the Stanford Cardinal, we'll be back. We're going to take a look at it. Talkin Cougars is presented by Flat Stick Pub. It's time for Talkin Numbers, presented by Cross Country Mortgage, making every mortgage feel like a win. All right, let's break down the Stanford Cardinal. Thankfully, they had a game against UW last week, and they almost got it done. I'm watching that game at the Pac-12 headquarters, and I love to root against the Dogs whenever I can, and they presented an opportunity to do exactly that. What you see over there, man? Who stands out to you when we talk about Stanford?
Got to be that quarterback, Ashton Daniels. I mean, he's really improved the last couple weeks. Played great in the second half against Colorado. Just made that Buffalo secondary look silly, and then followed it up again against Washington, over 360 yards passing, but he also had 18 rushes for 85 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he can use his legs. His dad played football at Georgia. He's from Buford, Georgia, highly recruited, ends up at Stanford, and you can see his progression. Every week he keeps getting better and better. And again, Washington State faced an Arizona State offense that was 12th in the conference coming into last week's game. Stanford's offense has had its struggles, but again is catching its stride. That Cougar defense is going to have to be on point. The Stanford Cardinal averaged almost 6 yards per play against the University of Washington, and the Dogs have been playing pretty well on defense. So that tells you that Stanford's offense under Troy Taylor, the head coach who's offensive-minded, is kind of figuring things out.
Yeah, Stanford had a balanced performance against UW, right? You throw it 31 times, you run the ball 35 times for 128. It was only 3.7 per carry, but you know how those numbers work, man. You can have a gain of 1, a gain of 2, and then bam, you break out 1 for 20, then you slow down a little bit. But the threat in the run game is always going to help an offense out. Right, so I look at Stanford, and they almost won that game. Honestly, there was a 4th down where they draw up a trick play. You hand the ball off to a receiver, you dump it off to another receiver, and he drops it wide open. He's wide open, almost makes that play. So Stanford is close, and this is the point in the season where you play teams like Stanford, Arizona State, the Arizonas, the teams that are looked at as kind of the bottom feeders of the league, and they can beat you because there's so much film out there, right? And there's great coaches in this league. They start to figure some things out. So I look at Stanford and I go, they're a team who's figuring out who they are exactly. And I look at the numbers, I watch that game, they look like a real good balanced team. A team that if they are around in the 4th quarter, they can do some things and they have nothing to lose. Those are the most dangerous teams with nothing to lose. So I look at the balanced attack. I mentioned over 30 runs, over 30 passes, and I go, look, you got to prepare for everything against these guys.
Yeah, and they got those classic big receivers, right? For the Stanford Cardinal, Eric Ailmanor has had a monster 2 weeks. Also, was almost unguardable against the Colorado Buffaloes. Followed it up again against the Washington Huskies, 9 for 146 and a touchdown. Shaw Smith-Wade, the great cornerback for Washington State, didn't play last week. A little bit questionable coming into this week. So if you're down your best cover corner, does Ashton Daniels attack on the outside with those big receivers? You mentioned the balanced attack also. Multiple running backs make an impact for Stanford. Casey Filkins is the leading rusher. E.J. Smith is very productive, but they also use a backup quarterback, Justin Lamson, inside the red zone. And then we talked about Ashton Daniels. That's 4 different guys that get carries. And I think when you have that type of multiplicity, it can be really difficult for a defense to cover. We already talked about how the Cougs are struggling to stop the run. Well, now when you got to worry about 4 or 5 guys that can run the football, that becomes a real problem.
Yeah, and the worst part is worrying about a quarterback who can run the football. Now your eyes have to be on him. You probably got to spy him in certain situations. Then we talked about Ailmanor, man. He is big on those sidelines. I think Stanford did a great job attacking the sidelines with the fade balls and the comebacks last week against UW. So you got to look for that too. When you have a big receiver, sometimes all you can do or have to do is just throw it up to him and allow him to make a play. And I think Minor is able to do that. You mix in the run with the pass. They have the quarterback that holds you accountable. And there's a recipe for some things there, man. I looked at the red zone numbers for Stanford. They're top 25 in the country when it comes to scoring in the red zone, and they prefer to run the football in the red zone. So again, inside the 20s, they can spread you out a little bit and throw the ball across the yard. Once they get inside the 20s, they can pack it up and play some big boy football. And that's kind of what I think about when I think of Stanford anyway, right? I think of running the football, big tight ends. I know that was back in the past tenure, the past head coach, but there's still some things that Stanford likes to do, and they have the ability to play some physical ball.
It's going to be really interesting. Jake Dickert has said this week he's going to get more involved on the defensive side of the football than he's been the past few weeks. And we know that, Dickert was the original defensive coordinator before being the head coach, is a defensive-minded guy. And to have him involved in that defensive game planning as you head into this game against Stanford, I think could be really important because, he's going to bring maybe a fresh set of eyes a little bit, maybe try and get the defensive players, particularly the second-level linebackers and secondary guys, to fit a little bit better in that run game, make sure that, they shore up the issues that they've seen the last few weeks, because a lot of it, again, has been the way teams have formationed them, gone unbalanced, used tight ends, used extra running backs, and that's really a recipe for success for Stanford also this year. So there's no doubt Washington State defensively is going to have to figure it out as they head into this game in Pullman.
Oh, that's good news, man. The head coach is rolling up his sleeves and saying, look, let's get back to doing what we do. Remember, just a couple of years ago, they're one of the leaders in the country when it comes to turning the football over. It seemed like every other week they were punching it out for a fumble. There were interceptions being made. And if I had to look at a group and say, all right, this is the week this group needs to step up, I'm going to look at that second level and say, okay, LBs, let's get pressure on the quarterback. So with Jay Dickert being more involved, I wonder if he's going to scheme up more blitzes and find some ways to get that second level a bit more active. I think these guys just got to have fun again, B. Sometimes the stress of expectations can get you. So right now, man, that stress should be gone. You guys just go out and play some football and try to get bowl eligible.
Yeah, we'll look at some of those key matchups against the Stanford Cardinal coming up next. Talkin Cougars is presented by Flat Stick Pub. Welcome back to Talkin Cougars. It's time now for our best bet. Brought to you by Northern Quest Resort and Casino, largest casino in the Northwest. Well, my money's on Washington State to end this 4-game losing streak and get a W against the Stanford Cardinal. One of the guys that I'd like to see on the field a little bit more who really flashed versus Arizona State was the young running back, Jovensky Schlenbaker. He came in, he had 2 catches for 17 yards, 1 rush for 8 yards. It was less about the production and more about the burst he showed with the ball in his hand. Nikhil Watson got a little banged up at the end of the game. Obviously, Dylan Payne was out last week. We'll see if he comes back this week. Either way, I'd like to see the young running back in the game a little bit more.
Schlenbaker, that's such a football name, B. That is a great name for a football player. And I'm with you, man. The Stanford, they're giving up 142 yards on the ground per game. So if there's any game for us to try to get this thing right, I'm with you. I think it's this week. And I'm looking for Cam Ward to continue to be that guy, because honestly, he has to be the guy we've seen for the majority of the year for this team to really have a shot. Completing 69% of his passes on the year. I expect him to have another game where he's extremely accurate. All right, finding Lincoln, Victor, Williams, and the rest of the guys, and just being creative, man, because I think that's what it comes down to. All right, getting young guys the ball, trying some new things, right? Getting Slim Baker into the game, and then just relying on what you know to be true. And what we know to be true is that Cam Ward is going to make this thing go. So, Cam, keep doing your thing, man.
Yeah, Cam Ward, Lincoln Victor productive again. Love seeing Isaiah Hamilton, the San Jose State transfer, get involved along with Josh Kelly and Kyle Williams. Playmakers all over the field for the Washington State offense. Got to make sure they finish in the red zone. Defensively, it'll be interesting to see. Do you see significant scheme changes? One thing that may come up, I wouldn't be surprised to see one of those safeties, whether it's Jaden Hicks or Sam Lockett, down in the box a little bit more, see if they can help out, again, those linebackers, like you mentioned, get paid to tackle, make tackles at or near the line of scrimmage, not downfield 6 or 8 yards. If Jake Dickert, Jeff Schmedding, the defensive coordinator, make some of those schematic changes to get more guys in the box and rely on your secondary to play man coverage, to me, this is the matchup to do it, because Stanford's got, we talked about some size at receiver, but not a ton of speed. So you're going to be able to match up, and you can play man and get more guys in the box.
Yeah, I love that thought. You know, I'm out here just outside of Seattle, so there's a safety out here in Jamal Adams who loves to play in that box. We need Hicks to be Jamal Adams this week, man, and get down in that box and just cause havoc, man. Make it messy, make it dirty, make it grimy. Let's get back to the roots of the Cougs and who we are, man. And man, that's Talkin Cougars, man. I'm Michael Bumpus. If you want more of me, Michael Bumpus 5 on Twitter, Monday through Friday on Seattle Sports 710 from 10 to 2. I'm one of the hosts of the Bumpus Stacy Show. And this weekend, I'll be on the Pac-12 Network. I'll be on the call with Roxy calling this game, WSU against the Stanford Cardinal, man. I'm looking forward to it.
It'll be good to see him Pullman bump, and it'll be good for the Cougs to get back home to Giesa Field. I'm Alex Brink. You can hear more from me on the radio call with Matt Chasnow and Jessamine McIntyre this Saturday against the Stanford Cardinal. And find me on Twitter at AlexBrink10. Thanks for tuning in. This is Talkin Cougars.